Your voice, your opinion, your community. Fact TV, free speech protected.
Local news, politics, business, sports, arts, music. Mike and Marty on the feed. Mike and Marty. Mike and Marty.
Good morning, Bellows Falls and Keene, and welcome to the feed. We're here in December, finally. Mike and Marty are here. We're here with Gary Fox. We're going to be talking about getting some updates on redevelopment projects downtown. But first, Marty.
So the Bells Falls Opera House for week number 2 is Moana 2. There's a lot of twos. I guess last week, because it was the first week in blockbuster sales, I believe, for the movie, which is awesome. The classic movie this evening is Commitment to Life. It is sponsored by BF Pride. Happening Thursday night at the Opera House is the Bellows Follies. Wild Goose Players will be doing a gender-bending fundraiser. So the gist of it is that songs and parts that were traditionally female parts will now be male parts and vice versa.
That's pretty cool.
There will be a live auction. They have some auction items. Tickets are $20, and tickets are available at the Wild Goose website, not the Bells Falls Opera House website. Saturday, December 7th at Halliday's, they are doing their annual candy cane sale. So how that works is you go in and you get a candy cane, and it's like wrapped up, and it will tell you what your discount is. Like you can get, I think usually between 10 and 50% off. Mm-hmm. So good time to go shopping local at Halliday's. Also on Saturday, Santa is coming to Allen Brothers. So I'm pretty sure for the past few years in their greenhouse, they've been having Santa come every Saturday. Yeah. So that's a great place. That's one great location to go and bring your kids to see Santa. On Sunday in Saxton's River, it's their Yule Fest. It's from 2 to 5 p.m. There's crafts, there's Santa again, there's food, there's tree lighting. Very, very family-focused, community-focused event on Sunday. And then the following Saturday, making sure everybody remembers, it's the Parade of Lights. So that's Sunday, December 14th, starting at 5 p.m. It's going to start in the square and go in the reverse direction that most of the other parades do. And there's a QR code if you want more information, or that's possibly to sign up. But I don't know, do you know if they're still accepting floats, or are they full? I know last time Betsy was here, she thought they were getting pretty close to full.
There's a lot, but I do believe they would take more.
Take more? Okay, awesome. So that's going to be a fun event. Rotary will be giving out free hot chocolate in front of the Opera House.
That's great.
Prior to the event. Here we are.
It's
Here we are again.
It's that hectic time of year, isn't
it? It is that hectic time of year.
Because you only there are a lot of Christmas things.
Oh, there's a ton of things. I just scratched the surface.
I think there's some things at Putney, and anyway. Gary, good to see you again.
Likewise.
What are the big
here?
What are the big happenings in town as far as redevelopment goes right now?
Right. So last month we talked about redevelopment projects where there's brownfields, which is really any redevelopment projects in
the state, pretty much, or in Bellows Falls.
Well, in the state, certainly, but for us, Bellows Falls, and then certainly Saxon's River, too. We have that property, the old Tenney's Golden Egg building we were just talking about. And so it's a heavy lift, and so today I wanted to talk about why do that, because it is a lot of investment by the community, a lot of work, mostly funded through the EPA with the Wyndham Regional Commission and Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation. But it's still that emotional investment we were talking about to redeveloping the area. So I have the easiest way to understand this, like the economics of redevelopment 101, is with these slides that this guy, Joe Manicazzi, came up with. He's a company called Urban 3 in Asheville, North Carolina, and he did this great presentation at BDCC's, their May Economic Summit 4 or 5 years ago. And so anyway, I pulled out, there's over 500 slides in this thing.
Don't worry. We haven't got
so I pulled out a few, and the thing is, they they will require very few words from me, but get the concepts
Yeah,
out
yeah.
there. So you can spend like
Yeah, okay.
20 seconds on each side. So the first principle there is bring data, right? We have a
Right.
lot of opinions, but what's the data
Everybody
that backs
has
up
an
what you
opinion,
write? So next slide. And where does our revenue come from? So if you can see in there, the one with the yellow arrow is Vermont. So these are all of the states, and the red
really?
is revenue from properties. Green is revenue from sales, which a lot of states have. On the left, where Vermont is, it's all New England is over there.
Okay.
And so
So what does that mean, sales by property? Or
well, so
revenue by
so it
property?
means the revenue that the state has for our where our money comes from to run the state. Any projects we do in state is from property taxes.
Oh,
All of
okay.
that
And that's-
red, that's the proportion of the budget, the state budget that comes from property taxes. Next slide.
What's wait?
Oh,
just
okay.
before but the green is what?
Oh, the green is sales.
So
sales
like-
tax.
Oh,
right.
sales tax. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
The purple is income tax, and the blue is other.
Interesting.
Yeah. So other could be like fees, gasoline
Yeah,
tax, that sort of thing.
gasoline
Yeah.
King licenses.
Right. So next slide, please. So there's a lot of different areas of the country where all the principles are the same, but I pulled out for the most part New England one. So this is Rockland, Maine. And what you can see there, the spikes, is how much revenue comes from those properties. And the concept is that most of the revenue that any town gets is from very few properties, and they produce a lot. So next slide. And this shows the Rockland Plaza, and which has a value of $437,687, so close to $500,000. Next slide. And Home Depot, a little over $500,000 per acre is the value of that. And so doing things per acre kind of standardizes land use and land values. So next slide. So when we drill down into, so what are the buildings we're supporting, you could see in the upper left-hand corner there's a giant building, and that generates, that has a value of $1,160,000 per acre. And then down below that is Main Street. It's in town, an older building, which has a value, four times as much value as that giant building on the hill there of $4,220,000 per acre. And in the upper right-hand corner, that corner old building has a $4,350,000 value. And then the small building below that, kind of looks like our post office.
It does look
Yeah,
like
it
a
does.
Is $7,869,000 per acre. So next slide. So point being, all of our revenue comes from property taxes, and few properties in a downtown generate a lot of tax per square feet. That's where your biggest bang for your buck is. And so here you could see the value of an area downtown is 7 times as much as areas on the outskirts of town. So you have 9 acres worth $36 million, and then you have 55 acres worth $28 million. And then next slide is another example that shows a plaza in Rockland where and so this is the basic how it averages out for that town. So there's 0.8 acres has the same value as 31 acres. So 0.8 acres downtown, same value as 31 acres outside of town.
And that's showing you the
Yeah.
point, the acreage, okay.
Yeah, yeah. So 1 million and 1 million $40,000 for 0.06 acres in town, and then $13.7 million for 31 acres. Next slide. So then the other part of the formula, right? So that's the part of the formula of being in town versus out of town. And one of the reasons for that is what's in the ground. We have our service, water, sewer, municipal services. And so next slide. So this shows the data is from South Bend, Indiana. And it shows 1850, starting with one person settling in there, up through a high point in the 1960s, and then starting to drop a little towards 2010. And next slide, please. And why that's important is as population was growing like that, this slide shows the population along the bottom line and the infrastructure that's put in to support that. And so the blue line, you can see that steep incline is more and more and more water pipe for the population that's increasing at a much slower rate. And,
Whoops, train's coming.
That's a great.
It's okay. That's
a
good.
great
I like
call.
that.
That's
so next slide, please. And here's roads. So this is Lancaster, California, and it's showing the when the roads were built, and then in the red. So you get to a certain year, population's increased, and they extend out a bunch of roads. And then the blue lines is when roads were rebuilt. So at each spike, there's a bunch of the roads that were built maybe 30, 40 years earlier getting rebuilt. And so next slide. What that does for a lot of communities, and it doesn't necessarily track because it can be 4 decades before it shows up. You know how much turnover there is in highway departments, management, and but anyway. So what's great that Joe Manicazzi did was tracking these in so many places all around the country over 100 years. And so in this picture, when this was created, maybe in 2017, there was a $25 million shortfall for what was needed to rebuild the roads that need to be rebuilt. So that's why we run into those budget challenges with our infrastructure, repaving. Next year, we'll be rebuilding Route 121 between Bellows Falls and Saxons River. And so next slide, please. So then the relentless rules of arithmetic. So that was the data that we just looked at, and now we're going to look at the impact of the data. Next slide, please. So this shows the dollar per square foot of different types of land use. So countywide includes a lot of the outskirts of towns is $1 per square foot. For residential. In the city, it's $5.50 per square foot. Then you have a Walmart and then a strip mall. It's $6.70 and $9.30 per square foot. And then you get into the downtowns, and you could see the drastic increase in the value per square foot. So first one is a 2-story mixed use, which we have plenty of in Bellows Falls, and then a 3-story mixed use. Also, we have plenty in our downtown at $47.80 and $95 per square foot, and then a 6-story, which we don't have. We have some 4 stories at $274 per square foot. Next slide, please. And then, so this slide shows over time, mixed use in the downtown. So the picture on the left, a building that was worth about the same value, $300,000 for 40 years. Nothing was done with it. And then it was renovated. And today, the building is valued at $11 million instead of $300,000. And so again, it's the numbers might not be exactly the same, but it's the proportions and the scale that we want to pay attention to. And then next slide, please. Asheville, North Carolina. So CBD is Central Business District. So for us, it's the downtown of Bellows Falls. And what you saw on the last slide was what happens when you renovate an old building. And here, Asheville went through a rebuilding in the 1990s and continued on in the early 2000s. And you can see the impact for the grand list value of those properties that were renovated. Went from $104 million in 1991 to $350 million in 2000 to $552 million in 2007. Next slide. So Redlands, California. What this section is going to show is some specifics of when you take care of your buildings, and we're just talking about some programs, and like what New York City went through with don't let the buildings deteriorate. One window breaks, fix it, even if it's empty. And so, at any rate, next slide, please. And so just to show the same principles here as everywhere else, where in the more into the downtown you are, the higher the value, those spikes per acre. Next slide. And so here you could see in the building on the bottom portion, a giant Citibank building worth $6 million per acre. And then you see in the upper right-hand corner a much smaller old building that was renovated worth $20 million per acre. So those impacts, they make a big difference. And we're going to tie all this together at the end with the data from Bellows Falls and the buildings that are here. We're going to look at those. So next slide, please. Here, same thing. You could see a Walmart in San Bernardino, California. Walmart at $1 million per acre. And the old shoe repair building that was renovated in the downtown, worth almost $4.5 million per acre. Next slide, please. And then we have pictures in Bellows Falls that look like this from the 1800s. Next slide. So what we're going to look at, so this is the Redlands Mall, and you can see it's a beautiful modern building, shiny, has lots of storefronts. Next slide. And so the area that's in the red circle here is Redlands in the development as it was in 1959. And next slide. And so this is in 2017. The graph with the showing the taxable value with the high purples, et cetera, that circled green area is the area where the the Redlands Mall is, and it's worth $5.6 million in taxable value. The 2017. According to the principles that the rest of the downtown did, where the buildings were fixed and maintained, it would be worth $21 million if they had renovated the buildings there instead of building a new mall. So 4 times as much. Next slide. So this is just to show, okay, this is New Hampshire, and you could see the same principles apply. Manchester, Nashua, a lot of those different types of spikes. Next slide, please. This is Rockingham, and thanks to Peter Paggi from Wyndham and Windsor Housing Trust, made a similar slide. He was at the same program that watched them in a cozy thing, and in presenting to the Development Review Board was showing what a redevelopment at the Bellows Falls Garage building would be. And so we have that same principle of taxable value. You can see Saxon's River and Bellows Falls. And this is for the 2018 grand list of the numbers that went into this picture. Next slide, please. Okay, so the principle that we're looking at when we looked at the roads and the water and sewer, that kind of peaked in building that out in 1960 and 1970 is in all of those places where they're all of a sudden on a $50 million road rebuild, $25 million short, was the drop in population that started happening at that time and accelerated starting in the 1990s. And so this slide shows Bellows Falls. I'll just really quickly, in case people can't see. 1870, 697 people. 1880, 2,229. 1890, 3,092. 1900, 4,337. That was when International Paper opened. 1910, 4,883. 1920, 4,860. 1930 down to 3,930, 1940 back up to 4,200, 1950 3,881, 1960 3,831, 1970 3,505, 1980 3,456, 1990 3,313, 2000 3,165, 2010 3,148, and 2020 2,747. So those starting in 1950, those are drops of 8.5%, 1.5%, 8.5%, 1.5%, 4%, 4.5%, down only 0.5% in 2010, and then down 12, almost 13% in 2020. So we have that same thing where we have all this infrastructure we built up through the 60s, 70s, 80s, and now less and less people.
Right.
But we still, now it's 40 years later, they have to be rebuilt. The water and sewer pipes, we're digging up, borrowing money to change over lead pipes that are up in this neighborhood. And so if you watch the village trustees meetings with Scott presenting on, and we have a $2 million bond to replace these lead water pipes here. And at any rate, so that is the situation that we're in. Next slide, please.
We're down to like 3 minutes.
3 minutes. Okay, so
should we nutshell it?
Yeah. So this shows the Bellows Falls data with next slide that shows the population data we already showed. This is 2019. So pre-pandemic and post-pandemic median household income in Rockingham. 2019 43,600. In 2022 70,165. And Windham County was higher than Rockingham at 52,000 in 2019, but and went way up to 65,000. But Rockingham went up more to 70,000. And so just we're doing really well here. And next slide. Actually, we're going to go to the next one. Is the most important one. So businesses and jobs. We have about 10% more jobs in Rockingham post-pandemic than we did pre-pandemic.
That's amazing.
And so that's driving the increase in wages. So like goods producing, jobs went from 550 to 600, and the wages went from 65,000 to 80,000. In manufacturing, we had 465 jobs. We now have 502, and the wages went from 68,000 to 85,000. So we are doing well in Rockingham, but property. So all of our revenue comes from property, and we've lost a lot of buildings. And the Island District. I don't know if you could have a minute put up the map of the area-wide plan. We have a huge area that's in downtown where there's that high value per acre, and there's an area-wide plan for redeveloping that area, and there's investment in it. We have Federal Highway putting in about $30 million between the Vilas Bridge and the Depot Street Bridge over the next 10 years. We have a mixed-use redevelopment at close to $20 million, and a business development at Robertson Paper that'll be $10 to $15 million. So the investment is coming and is there, but it's really important that we can the compelling reason for doing these all of those areas are brownfields, but that's where the biggest bang. That's really
Yeah, it's
the
where the
only thing we
biggest
can do
bang
to
for your
reverse
buck.
that
Yeah, yeah.
picture and that death spiral we were talking about
Yeah.
earlier. What is it that Allegra says?
Revitalize or die.
Right.
And I
So-
think that's the gist of what all this. You have to revitalize, and it makes more sense to renovate and revitalize your existing buildings in your downtown
Yes.
than to think, oh, urban sprawl and put in a
Yes.
mall and put all in.
Yeah,
Not that we have a lot of
Springfield
outlying
Mall.
areas,
And
but,
all of those little
but-
buildings we were looking at that were, the value was like 4 million plus per
Yeah.
acre, et cetera, are very similar to what the train station looks
Yeah.
like. And losing that building, it's the same kind of loss of 4 and 5 times the value that we'd get at letting it crumble and building something new. Like
So
All right, Gary.
we are down
Anyway,
to
We're
like 10
down to a
seconds.
minute. I gotta say
I'm
one
good.
thing.
I'm done.
You have really opened my eyes, especially with those last numbers. That was amazing.
Yeah.
You should come back and let's do another show
January.
in January, and let's really push those, because I think people think, oh, gloom and gloom, no
We'll dig
jobs
into these
here.
numbers and
Dig
how the
into those-
train station
yeah.
project will help boost those further.
But even the
by
fact
looking
that
at other-
the income and the number of jobs have grown
Yep.
by that degree is just
Yeah.
amazing.
But they're going to take us off with a hook in a minute, so
All right.
we're done.
All right.
We're done with
So
time.
that's it for this
That's
week.
for this week.
See you next week.
We'll see you next month with
Bye.
Garrett.
Thanks
Bye.
for having me.